Hello class. This week we are doing chapter 32.3. This section is called the Holocaust. Now many of you have already probably heard of the Holocaust. So what were our sort of objectives this week is to trace the course of the persecution of the Jews by the Nazis. So where does this persecution start? Okay. Now our second objective is to look and describe the results of what we call the final solution. So if you don't quite know what the final solution is, hopefully by the end of this lecture you will know. So first, before we discuss the specifics of the Holocaust, we should sort of understand the main idea of how and why Hitler wants to justify something this horrible. And it all starts with racist beliefs. So Hitler, he is very up on German culture and nationalism. And he's so focused on German culture that this leads to being very racist to anyone who does not fit in what they would see as typical German culture, okay, or nationality. Hitler put a word to this. So anyone who is Aryan, these are people who are from the Germanic peoples, they are the master race. Now, if we were to look at what is the master race today, I will give you an example that if I was living in Germany or the Netherlands, I would be considered part of the master race. I have full German blood, okay? I'm from Dutch heritage. These are the types of people that Hitler looks to as being superior and above anyone else. And part of that is due to the fact that I have blue eyes. My hair is dirty blonde, okay? So if you have an idea of what the Aryan race would be, this is what it would look like, okay? The second thing is because of these deeply racist beliefs, this ends up leading to the systematic murder of millions and millions of Jews. They have an estimate that it is 6 million Jews that died during this time. But it's also important to note that while Jews were sort of the dominant ethnic minority in Germany at the time, Hitler is also sort of prejudiced and racist against people of African ancestry, people who are LGBT, that's gay, lesbian, bi, transgender. Roma, that would be what we would know as gypsies, although gypsies is politically incorrect now, okay? Hitler sort of, these types of people are also in the Holocaust as well. Now, the way that Hitler sort of gained support for these very racist views, what we would say is anti-Semitic views, that's anti-Jew, is that many Europeans in Europe at the time actually had sort of a negative view of Jews already. They basically would blame Jewish people for a lot of their own country's failures. Now, this is sort of unreasonable. There's no really reason why people would blame the Jews, except that people do not really want to take a good look at what's happening in their country. Hitler knew this. He knew that people in Europe already had sort of negative feelings at times towards Jews, and he fed on that. And eventually he passes what we call are the Nuremberg laws. Nuremberg laws, this is in 1935, and he's slowly taking away rights of Jews. It doesn't happen quickly. This is something we really need to understand. Not all Jews are immediately carted away to concentration camps. First, Jews are, they have their rights taken away as citizens. They cannot vote. Next thing, they cannot marry anyone who's German. They're not allowed to marry anyone who is not Jewish, okay? The last thing is that they they're only allowed to work in certain areas, okay? That is the slow sort of climb to what will eventually be the concentration camps. So it's important to know that it doesn't start with the concentration camp. As you can see in the pictures on this sort of slide, this is when we start to see that Jewish people are being marked. So they're being marked with the Star of David. That is a way for people in these places that are dominated by Germans, they will know exactly who is Jewish and who is not. So at this time, even though Jewish's rights were being limited, there was no real violence against Jews until November 1938. What ends up happening is we actually have a young sort of adolescent boy. He's 27 years old, not adolescent. A 27-year-old boy, he's going to visit his father in Germany. And after living there for years, he finds out that his father had been deported to Poland. This young man, because he was so upset, he decides to go take revenge. So he kills a Nazi soldier. This one event, where a Jewish man kills a Nazi, sparks sort of more violence towards the Jewish people as a whole. What ends up happening is the Nazis sort of respond with the Night of Broken Glass. We call it the Kristallnacht. Now what ends up happening is many Nazis storm Jewish places of business and homes, and they kill up to 100 Jews. This is the first time we hear of Jewish people being killed, sort of as a revenge for the one Nazi soldier who was killed. Okay, as you can see in the picture below, we have sort of an image of that night. So after this Night of Broken Glass, this sort of issue begins to take a huge turn, and a turn for the worst. What ends up happening is many Jews start to realize that Germany is no longer a safe place for them. So while they're slowly getting their rights taken away, this first encounter of violence makes a lot of them flee Germany. And they flee to countries like Britain, France, and the US, okay? What ends up happening is that there are so many Jewish people fleeing this country that these three countries that are sort of willing to help admit Jewish refugees end up having to close their doors because they can't handle all the new sort of refugees coming in their country. Hitler sees it as no one wants to accept the Jewish people. And so he starts thinking up of another solution. His solution is to isolate the Jews. This is sort of the next step in his plan of solving the Jewish problem. And the reason I put quotation marks is Hitler, this is a racist idea or an anti-Semitic idea of solving the Jewish problem. The solution to this problem is that Hitler decides to isolate all the Jews and move them all into what we call as a ghetto. So all Jews are now taken out of their homes, and they're sort of forced to move to different designated cities. So there are specific cities in Germany and Poland that he is going to be moving the Jewish people to. They're forced to live in an area of the city that is separated off just for Jews. And often this area is walled, and there's tons of barbed wire sort of to make sure that no Jewish person can escape. Hitler's hope is that the Jewish people are going to all die of disease and starvation in these ghettos. Okay? Despite the bad conditions, though, Jewish people end up surviving. Not many people are dying at this time. So this is going to lead to Hitler thinking of a more permanent plan to solve the Jewish problem. Hitler calls his final plan for the treatment of the Jews the final solution. This final solution is genocide. If you do not know what genocide means, it is the systematic killing of an entire people, okay? Genocide still happens today, to be clear. It's basically the mass murder of a people group based on their ethnicity, their race, their sexuality, or their gender, okay? In this case, we are discussing ethnicity. It doesn't, as I've said before, it doesn't only include Jews. It's also including the Roma, which we would call gypsies, okay? It also includes anyone who is insane, disabled, terminally ill, LGBT, that's gay or lesbian. These make it into Hitler's final mass genocide. Now, again, it does not begin with the concentration camp. Many of the killings actually begin with creating these sort of killing squads. So Nazis in Eastern Europe and in the Soviet Union, parts of Soviet Union where Germany occupied, they created sort of a group of men that would go around and just shoot down any Jewish person they would see. These were called mass executions. Eventually, many of these Jewish people were also sent to concentration camps and slave labor camps. Slave labor camps, they would often put the people to work, and they would hope that because of the extreme work without food, that many of these people would starve to death. Eventually, we have the building of these gas chambers. So the final stage is in 1942, they build extermination camps. So to be clear, a concentration camp, these are labor camps where Jewish people are sent to work in hopes that they will starve to death. There's also going to be killing squads at a concentration camp. An extermination camp, that is where we are going to see the gas chambers. And the gas chambers, they would often say that the Jewish people were going to take a shower. And oftentimes what would be coming out is poisonous gas that would kill a group of Jewish people in one go. Many people who arrived to the extermination camps were the weakest at the concentration camps. So these would be mostly women, children, elderly, and sick. They were killed immediately. They would not even go to a concentration camp. Some of the survivors, overall, at the end of the Holocaust, we have about 6 million Jews being killed. Fewer than 4 million survive. So we can conclude that Hitler's final solution to try and exterminate a whole ethnicity of people is pretty successful. Out of about 10 million Jews that were living in Eastern Europe, Germany, and even in Poland, there was only about 4 million left. So what I would like you to do, this is one of your questions, is I want you to look on page 939, and at the top of the page there is a chart. And I would like you guys to tell me, where did many of the Jews, where were they exterminated? Okay, so you're looking at the percentage or the amount of original Jews versus how many Jews were killed. Okay, so tell me which countries had the most Jews killed. That's your first question. Your second question is, I want you to discuss the causes leading up to the final solution. So what is Hitler thinking about? And what is the process of him going from taking away Jewish rights to his final solution in the end? The last thing I want you to do this week is you are going to be looking for some sort of short story or excerpt video on YouTube about a Holocaust survivor. So to be clear, you are going to be looking on YouTube, you're going to be looking up stories. I'm going to give you resources that can start your search on Schoology.